pentagram dedicated to Henry Foreman. In the years of the primal force and the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth.
Yellow goat, wherefore art thou, yellow goat? Has anyone ever seen a yellow goat, Bathory? I've heard about it. Once upon a time, it must be in the late 90s, I think a guy called Henke, who used to play in Tyrfing, told me, oh, I've got one. I bought it for £5 in a charity shop near me. He lived in rural Sweden somewhere. He goes, oh, you can have it for like 100, well, it wouldn't have been euro yet because we didn't have the euro, but whatever was the equivalent of like 300 guilders or something, because we were on a small tour of Holland with Tyrfing. We did 2 small tours in either, I think it was 1999. Probably somebody's going to correct me in the comments about that. No, it was May 2000, Alan. Yep, it possibly was. No, I think it was 1999. And we were staying in what was basically like a sort of caravans beside a petting zoo. Yes, insert your own euphemism as you wish. Tyrfing and Primordial, I think it was 99. And we got talking about rare records and record collecting. And Henke said to me, oh, I've got that. And I said, oh, would you sell it? And he was like, yeah, I don't really have many records. I just bought that one. And I was like, okay. In fact, the truth was I would almost have flown. At that time, you could do Ryanair Dublin to Arlanda, Stockholm. I would almost have flown to Arlanda and, hired a rickshaw or a hot air balloon to fly to his house to buy his Bathory yellow goat. But sad to say, needless to say, I didn't have the last laugh because I didn't get that Bathory yellow goat. So I'm going to talk about record collecting today. Is there any point to it? Is it just needless ballast, as my friend Matt from the Razor of Occam says, alumni of Destroyer 666? He just said to me, mate, it's fucking ballast, mate, weighs you down. And thusly he just shipped all his records back to Australia and now is free as a bird. Well, at least that's what he says. But there is something to be said for that. In an age where, we constantly repeat as a joke the own nothing and you will be happy mantra. Is there some truth in the fact that if you do own less, you might be happier? Of course not that some Davos ingratiate is going to be able to tell you what you can and you can't own, but just by choice, by just going, I choose to own less so I can be, I was watching something the other day about how house prices in Portugal are rising because people are what they call them digital nomads, people who can remote work from everywhere. So they think to themselves, well, why would I live in a dreary, rainy, cold, grim northern European suburb when I could actually sit on the beach in the Algarve or in Faro and work from here all the same, and there could be sunshine and all those kind of things. Makes sense, doesn't it? But what that does do is, of course, it drives up rent and local people can't afford things. I think it's called sort of gentrification. Could we call it digital nomadic gentrification? I kind of see the point. I really do see the point to it, to be honest with you. But, of course, if you're weighed down with tons and tons of ballast, which is what I suppose a record collection is, then the idea that you could just up sticks and move with your laptop and just, be one of those people you see in the advertisements of Such a Life, bright and breezy with your morning coffee on a balcony, not staring at the window at the lashing rain, which it's been for most of the summer here in Dublin, thinking to yourself, I could do with a little bit of vitamin D. Well, your record collection, this is kind of like your ballast. So that's where I'm going to start. First things first, though, you can go to patreon.com/Alan Averill and become a patron of mine. Pretend you are a medieval king and you're paying me to write poetry about you. In fact, you probably could at this stage of the game. No tiers, no levels, none of that kind of stuff. There's conversations and books and films and, it's not as awful as you might think. Go over there and take a look. Nemthianga_primordial. That is my Instagram if you want to follow my not very exciting adventures. And primordial_official if you also want to be trapped in the world of a band who neither really want in or out of this whole digital thing, but realize they have to kind of make some form of their own promotion, but do it in a rather haphazard way. If you enjoy that kind of thing, head over there. The podcast, as ever, is sponsored by Metal Blade Records. Go to the links underneath, Metal Blade Records, or indiemerch.com/Metal Blade Records. And you can use the promo code AA2024 to get and surely order your bastard green version of the new Primordial album. Or you could have ordered the limited box set 7-inch edition of Exile Amongst the Ruins, which is quite nice. I mean, I don't know that they actually have any copies of that, but you can go and take a look. So, let's get to ballast. Are we idiots for collecting records? I mean, that's the thing. Does it really matter anymore? A part of me really does quite believe that the idea of owning something, the idea of holding Ride the Lightning in your hand and looking at the... who was it who had the dirty sock in the picture on the back? And when they're in the backstage room, it's Kirk Hammett, isn't it? Looking at Kirk Hammett's dirty sock in Ride the Lightning, or looking in the thanks list of all those early death metal records and thrash metal records, and looking for other bands. Oh, you see, I don't know, Laz Rocket thanks Holy Terror, but, you know, or looking in, for example, the thanks list in Forest of Equilibrium by Cathedral was just a who's who of all the doom metal demo bands you should go and try and find, whether it was Count Raven or Penance or whoever it was. I think we could be quite inspiring. Also, all the thrash metal records with the cool photo inlays and all that kind of stuff. The ownership of a record, the ownership of something, whether it's whatever that piece of art is, I mean, of course, owning a one-off piece of art is very different from owning a copy of Ride the Lightning. But that ownership of Ride the Lightning, at the time, being a kid, you know, you worked, I don't know, whatever it was, painting walls or doing some gardening or something to get some money, your weekly income. Now, I remember, I guess around 87, 88, getting off the bus to school a couple of stops early so I could save an extra 30, 40p. And if you did that all week, you might be able to save up just enough money for a second-hand vinyl to add to the other money for a second-hand vinyl you got. Or you did some odd jobs around the place. And if you were lucky, you could get one record a week. But because maybe metal was so popular and there's so many second-hand record stores everywhere, all you had to do was really wait a week. So, for example, if Fabulous Disaster came out, it must be 1989, and you didn't have the $8.95 it was to buy it brand new in the Sound Cellar, which is which is still here actually. The Sound Cellar is the name of the record store in Dublin. We all used to hang out in the 80s. You'd see hundreds of thrashers outside in 1988, 89. And if you didn't have that money, that $8.95 for the vinyl that Saturday, you could be sure that of the 50 to 100 people who bought it that day, next Saturday, if you looked around and you were in early, I used to meet my friend Collie. He might be listening. Shout out to the call. And we used to meet on a Saturday morning at 9 or 10 in the morning, and we used to scour all of the second-hand record stores. And it took us until 3 or 4 in the afternoon to go walk around everywhere, traipse around town. And you might traipse around town with £6 in your pocket, but that might mean you could have maybe you got Sodomy and Lust, a second-hand copy of Fabulous Disaster, and maybe a cassette bootleg, because they're in Dublin. And what used to happen is that every gig that happened, whether it was Metallica or Slayer, there'd be people selling cassettes on the bridge, which means O'Connell Bridge. You probably, if you visited Dublin, you've walked across O'Connell Bridge. But all along the bridge would be dudes selling out of suitcases cassette tapes. Some of which, somewhere, I still have a few. Metallica, Top Hat, 1988, or Slayer, Top Hat, 1988. Some of them sounded great, some of them didn't, but you just ate it all up when you were a kid. Somewhere or other, I have Greetings from My Guts, Slayer, 1983, 1984, I think, and a few other old bootlegs that I got back then, Dark Angel maybe. But you would spend all day going around town looking for those records, and you had a few pounds, and it sounds romantic, I suppose, because it sort of is, but what it did is it gave you a great respect for what you owned, because you took home your copy of Ride the Lightning and you'd spend all week, saving the money or, doing odd jobs, like I said, and that was your copy of Ride the Lightning. And it's really interesting. I remember, as I said before on the podcast, having an argument with a Swedish guy who was all for the Pirate Bay and all that kind of stuff, because he had a sort of altruistic, idealistic notion, born in a leafy Stockholm suburb, free of the despotism of fascism and communism in the 20th century. And his idea was that all art should be free. which, you know, is a very sort of idealistic viewpoint that comes from, if you want to call it that, you know, a sort of middle class society. But at the end of the day, when you look at the initial impulses, of, I suppose, of the 1980 Silicon Valley people, the people who invented all this kind of stuff, you watch Jared Lanier, someone like him, and he discusses how in the beginning they did have this utopian vision of separating the sort of classness. I will say that again. Separating the sort of the idea that art, you know, should be free and available to people. But what, of course, that does is screw the artist, because they don't, you know, have that income stream anymore. They don't have a way of developing an income stream. I'm not going to get mired down too much in that, but fundamentally, I would be against that sort of Pirate Bay ethic, because, well, we can see where it leads now, which is, I suppose, a sort of existential meaningless in art, which is, again, we return to the idea of the you will own nothing and be happy paradox, because I think that some of the ideas of that Davos set, of some of the impulses behind that, that aren't just authoritarian or whatever you want to say, are quite inspired by the Spotify model. Because if you think about it, who are the cool parents anymore handing down record collections to their kids? Now, I got about 40 or 50 vinyls from my parents, some of which they still have in their house, some of which I have here, some of which I've bought again, like Fairport Convention, Liège and Leaf, which I used to hear around the house when I was a kid. Beautiful old vinyl. It's a kind of silvery grey cover with purple on it. And I bought it secondhand again. And partly because my parents just scratched the fuck out of their records, but that's a whole other story. I bought Rolling Stones, a few old Rolling Stones vinyls that they had. Chuck Berry, this kind of thing. Because they had pretty decent taste. And, you know, ZZ Top and that kind of thing. And so it gave you a respect for the things that they had, but then when they were handed over to you, but what do people hand over now to their kids? Oh, here's the password for my my streaming services, and if you want to upgrade to premium and avoid the ads, it's up to you. But you don't actually hand over anything. It's just a password, and if that website doesn't work, then there is just no music. And so it kind of, what it does is, over these decades, not only does it sort of promulgate the idea that music doesn't really have a worth or a meaning, which I think we can see reflected in not only the kind of music that's popular anymore, but also in just the way, I mean, I can see artists are treated, especially post-lockdown and all that kind of thing, when everyone has just risen, has just, you know, made the costs of doing business with artists exponentially more expensive, you know, whether it's flights, it's luggage, it's commissions that festivals or venues try and take from you as an artist. All of these things have just become bigger and bigger and bigger. And what they've shone in stark, you know, shone a light upon, especially during lockdown, was the idea that, oh, you have no other income to depend on for these 2.5, 3 years where you're grounded and you cannot play. And because streaming equity is just a complete nonsense. It just is, you know, it doesn't exist. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a record collection. And you start that record collection when you're a kid. Now, if you were listening to last week's podcast, you will know that I kind of swore I would talk about Manowar. And don't worry, I'm getting around to it. I am working around to a fantastic Manowar anecdote. But I think starting a record collection now, I do wonder about it, about even in the underground, the people who run underground labels that I talk to quite often say there is a difference between some of the younger people getting into the underground scene now as opposed to 10 years ago. They're selling less vinyl at stalls, and the younger people seem to be, well, more interested in merch, but less interested in the vinyl collecting and owning the vinyl, which can only really be bad news for underground labels, because that's really how they survive. And that is the 1-to-1 vinyl sales. You know, as shipping costs have grown, waiting lists for pressing vinyl have grown. Also, just sending out vinyls in the post. Some of you have messaged me going, why do you not stock? Well, Primordial has a pretty useless online store, which was the cause of many arguments over the years. But post-lockdown, it just became so expensive to post out things from Ireland that, to be honest, even just sending out 10, 15, 20 shirts like I did last week netted a profit that barely kind of pays for all of the shipping and all of the other stuff to get those shirts to here in the first place. And you begin to wonder, well, this seems an awful lot of work for something that is divided by 5 and then text, which is what we tend to do. But of course, if you're running a label, you're relying on those one-to-one orders. And as they fall away, because maybe younger people seem less interested in the, I don't know, the whatever is the modern underground equivalent of the Necros Christos vinyl, the Grave Miasma first EP, the first Balzer EPs, the excitement that surrounded all those releases 10 years ago. Or let's call it the Beherit Blasphemy paradox, which seems to have kind of worn off, which was the endless pressings of those records. Have they kind of died away? Has the sort of the myth, the mythology, the romance, the cultness with a K and an umlaut over the U faded away from the underground? Because 2 weeks ago I talked about seeing Beherit for the first time, and you know what? I don't own the Oath of Black Blood on vinyl. I own it on cassette. Yeah. In fact, the cassette is sitting in my toilet. If you've ever been locked in the dungeon and had to use the latrine, you will have seen it sitting proudly on the shelf of my toilet, amongst other nonsense. But yes, I own the cassette of the Oath of Black Blood, and a part of me still wants the vinyl. But am I willing to go and pay, I don't know, €200 for that vinyl? Is there really a need for me to own the Oath of Black Blood on vinyl, to get it in the post and go, I have it, play it once and then file it away under B? And plenty of records I've played to death. I played, Bloodfire Death so many times back in the day. I've had to buy it like 2 or 3 times. Same with Ride the Lightning. Same with Holy Terror Mine Wars. There's been records I've played to death that I still play a lot. The new Witch Hazel Sacrament, the 4th one, is sitting on the vinyl player now right in front of me. And very often I just flick on and start with that. And I've played it lots of times. But recently I filled a major hole in my record collecting. No pun intended. And that was Samael, Medieval Prophecy. Now, Samael was one of the first bands I ever wrote to, maybe in 90 or something, that I got a very quick reply from around Worship Him, and an old Samael shirt and stuff. But I never found Medieval Prophecy to buy. I tried to buy it back when it came out, sold out, and I just found a copy on eBay. And I bought it. I just impulse purchased. Now, I think in the end it was €150, which I suppose by the Discogs measure of things is not that bad. And how white and middle class and privileged of me to have €150 to nonchalantly drop on a 7-inch from 30 odd years ago. And I know that when I get it, there will be that feeling of, finally, fucking hell. Now, where's Nemesis Day of Retribution? The original one. But am I just a sucker? Am I just a fool for filling the gap? Do we really need it? Or is the bootleg 12-inch fine? The band did repress it in a CD-only version, I think, from their website, but they didn't do the disservice, I think, of repressing the original 7-inch exactly the same. I think that's kind of sort of uncool for bands to do, to repress an old 7-inch exactly. But I thought about it and I thought, is it the same thing? Because the beauty and the joy of collecting records is, or was, especially not now when everybody knows the worth of things. Everybody knows, anybody with a small record store can just go on Discogs and go, like for example, there's a record store in Dublin that has Angel Corpse Exterminate on the wall amongst all their pop records, and it just says €80. And I'm thinking to myself, it's been there for like a year and a half, 2 years. Maybe if it was 40 or 50, I might buy it, because I think I only have Exterminate on vinyl. But how do we measure these things? Because if it doesn't sell, it's just a record that's sitting on the wall. Surely you should make it the price approximate to the to its environs, to the supply and demand for that kind of record, or else it just sits in the. Is it better to have €50 for it now, 30 less than you want, and actually sell the thing, or just hold on to it for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and then eventually the shop closes down and it's in a stall somewhere else for 15 because somebody just wants to liquidate the store? Yep, that's kind of how I sort of think about things. But the joy of collecting records before, I remember once in 1991 maybe finding the entire of the 1980s St. Vitus vinyls, including 12 inches, everything, Thirsty and Miserable, for £10. And that's the great beauty and joy of record collecting. One of my biggest regrets is telling a girlfriend of the time, sometime in the, must be like 93, 94, I don't know. Hey, will you look through that stall there, will you? You know, that box of records. We were in a bit of a rush, and lo and behold, what did she find? Death Crush. Third record in, Death Crush. £3, complete with letter from Euronymous in it and everything. And I was like, oh, you have to give me that. And she's like, nah, I think I'll keep this. Still has it. There you go. My impatience to move on to the next shop. Death Crush. I had Death Crush on demo, actually. The cassette of it somewhere. But not the record. But that was the beauty and the joy and the tragedy of collecting vinyls back then. You never knew what you were going to find on a Saturday. In 1990, finding like the original Angel Witch record. This was like holy grail to find the old New Wave British heavy metal records, whether it was Witchfind or all that kind of thing. But yeah, a Mayhem copy of Death Crush. Nope. Just gone because of my ridiculous impatience. There's a moral in that story somewhere, which maybe should have stayed my hand when it came to pressing the purchase button on eBay. But it's just not the same, really, is it? Just looking at a picture on a screen and going, oh, yeah, I'll have that. Click. Money just gone, you know, less like numbers on a screen, gone, come back, gone. There's a vinyl in the post. Okay, cool. Like the joy of finding records was finding them in that old charity shop in a small town or something, you know, when you're waiting for a train, going, oh, it's an old charity shop or an old record store. I wonder what they have. And lo and behold, you find a copy of Slayer, Greetings from My Guts in 1988, or you find a copy of, I don't know, the Iron Cross, Criminally Insane or something like this, which is something that exactly happened to me. In fact, I can see it now in the corner of the room. But there's something about modern bootlegs that I'm kind of not interested in. Like, I went into a shop in Dublin last year, and there were 2 or 3 Merciful Fate, but they're modern bootlegs of old shows. Somehow a part of me thinks like, well, if you didn't buy that bootleg in 1988 or 89 or 90, do you really want it now? Because it's a new print, it's that fresh, modern smelling vinyl that I don't like. You want the fusty, musty, dusty old. That's a good name for a punk band. You can use that if you want. Fusty, musty and dusty. Or maybe it's a 70s prog band. I'm not sure, but you feel free to use it. Have that one on me. You like the smell of the old vinyls. And that's the beautiful thing. If you pick out an old, like take Nuns Have No Fun and the old typed out lyric sheet and all that kind of stuff, you don't really want the new version of it. So I sort of don't buy the new bootlegs. My Greetings from My Guts, all those old Slayer cassettes I used to have, or all those kind of things. I know my good friend Bart from Metal Blade still collects all the Slayer bootlegs from 86, 85, 87, and he seems to have a quite hefty collection of them. But for me, kind of, unless they were pressed in the 80s, I sort of don't care. So it's a sort of weird snobbishness about bootlegs, which when you think about it is utterly ridiculous, because bootlegs are bootlegs, right? So maybe record collecting is for dickheads. I don't know. You tell me. I mean, does it matter which edition you have? I don't think I have the first pressing of De Mysteries Dom Satanas. Do you? Does it matter? Yes and no. I mean, I think it matters to own the record. I don't think it matters to your love of the music whether you have the first pressing or not. I remember many years ago living in a house with Dara from Invictus, and in the toilet was the poster of, I think, one of the first Deathspell Omega pressings of one of the first records, and some guy, some friend of Dara's was there and said, oh my God, you have the poster on the wall. This means you've opened the vinyl. And his head was just, you know, about to burst with apoplexy. And I thought, well, yeah, who cares? I mean, the vinyl is to be played, to be enjoyed, to be digested, ingested, to be fingered, to be, bring back fingering, by the way, but to be fingered, to be, poured over, to the lyrics to have gone over, exactly like if you take out my copy of Peace Cells Produced Buying or Other Lightning, you will see 2 well-worn covers, but they've got some history to them. So that begs the question, would I be happy with just a new pressing, a bootleg pressing of Medieval Prophecy? I have to admit there's a part of me that he wants the old pressing. He wants the original pressing. And when I actually found it, I would have Nothing would have given me more joy than to actually find it in a box full of 7 inches of just, pop music or something. I remember being at a record fair somewhere in the, must be early 90s. No, let's say 93, 94, and finding Unleashed, Grave, Tiamat 7 inches, all the original old Century Media 7 inches, just in a random box of 7 inches, along with lots of, I don't know, pop stuff of the time. And that's the beauty of record collecting. But it's very, very difficult to do that anymore, because everybody knows the worth of everything now. And every record collector in a shop, or anybody who has a vinyl stole a shop and go, oh right, I see, so that means on Discogs or the eBay accumulator or whatever, oh, so somebody paid €300 for War Master, so that's how much it must be worth. But it's only worth that if somebody comes into the shop with the money in their pocket to go, oh, a copy of Bolt Thrower War Master, I think I have €300, I think I'm going to buy that. Now of course that does happen, but you see yourself, if you're a record collector and you're sitting there listening to me now, and you go on eBay, you see the same postings going round and round and round and round, and somebody somewhere wants like €900 for a copy of Abominations of Desolations, or €1,000 for Apocalyptic Raids, or something completely ridiculous. Probably because at some stage, somewhere, somebody with a ton of money has paid that. And so they go, well, if they've paid that for one copy, and that's the top purchase, that's what I'm going to put this at. So the vinyl goes round and round and round and round again. Although I will say, one of the few records I ever stole was Hellhammer Apocalyptic Raids. I stole it and I owned it. And this is way back in the early 90s. I just gave it to Dara from Invictus. It was begging to be stolen. The vinyl was left in it. It was on the last stall. And I just thought, you know what? £1. Live a little dangerously. And that story is beyond the statute of limitations, I may add. But collecting things like seems like such a middle class male obsession, doesn't it? The sort of having a collection. And admittedly, it is quite a cool thing to glance over the collection, or to go through it and find you have a double, and give somebody and a vinyl sometime when they, you can go, you know what? I think I have 2 copies of black metal, or something like this, or just, when you get in the mood and you've got a couple of beers in and you just pull out. I can turn my head now to the right and I can see a copy of Sarcophago INRI, and I go, you know what? That needs to be played tonight after beer 3. And that's the joy and the beauty of it. But if you said to me, hey, Alan, do you want to go and live on a Greek island? I would think to myself, well, what do I do with all my ballast? And maybe sometimes you miss out on some life experience, some dreamlike life experience of living as a traveling troubadour on a Greek island, hopping from island to island. And you can't do it because you have all of your ballast. What am I talking about? Again, just absolute nonsense. Get to the Manowar anecdote. Yes, indeed. The Manowar anecdote. Now, if you've watched my Call to the Grave, me waffling on about records, which I admit during the summer I didn't put much effort into, but I will get back to them. I've been hassling my buddy Addy from Solstafir, who, by the way, their new songs, pretty bloody good, huh? Got some fire in their belly again. I have been wondering if there's anything to be said for doing a few little reviews of albums these days, or does anybody really care about that, my opinions about records, or do you really want to hear what I think about having spent 4 or 5 hours listening to the entire Abigur discography last week? Probably not. Probably best kept to myself. In fact, most likely probably all of this is best kept to myself, and we could just wind all this nonsense down, couldn't we? We've done 200 odd episodes, but not before the Manowar anecdote. So I have about, a conservative estimate must be like 40 to 50 Manowar vinyls. And back in the 90s, early 90s, well, from 87, 88, it was after seeing the video for Blow Your Speakers, I think on MTV or something or other. Blow Your Speakers is the biggest Kiss song that Kiss never made, I think. In fact, most of side A of Fight in the World is sort of a bit like Kiss. Still cool. I still like it. Doesn't matter. But I just fell in love with Manowar. And before I went to secondary school, which in Ireland is 13 to 18, I was a huge Manowar fan. And didn't realise once you joined big school, let's call it that, that all the other thrash kids were just like, yeah, what? Manowar. Same thing they said for Candlemas and Merciful Fate. That their opinions were to change on those in a couple of years when black metal brought all those things back around into the spotlight again. But yeah, Manowar were sort of a object of derision. And not an object of derision like they are now, because they're 70 years old and still wearing New Rock boots, and they have what's his name on the guitar with his incredibly bad wig, and the songs are just But back in the 80s, when they were a force of nature, they were without a doubt one of the only bands who could hold a torch to Judas Priest and Iron Maiden when it comes to heavy metal songwriting. If you said, which is, the original argument, Judas, Priest or Maiden, I think you could have added Manowar songs or Manowar to that. Just about. They are one of the only bands, I think, who could be in that conversation. And also, let's be honest, without Manowar, there probably isn't really a Bathory, Bloodfire Death. There isn't really an epic Viking Bathory. I mean, let's be clear that Enter the Eternal Fire by Bathory, that is Bridge of Death. It's the same riff, it's the same lyrics, across the Bridge of Death, across the Bridge of Sin, open up to let me in, blah, blah, blah. Same riff, same song. Of Doom is the same song as Army of the Immortals from Hail to England. You sent us your letters, you sent us your hails, blah, 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 etc. I probably should have got the lyrics up there to read them out to you, but there's similarities you should take a look at. It's clear Corton was a huge Manowar fan. There's even lyrics, all false prophets and deceivers shall swing from the trees, which I think is a line from Sign of the Hammer, is also a line in Bloodfire Death. There's nods all over the place from Manowar to Bathory. The epic style is just, it's like a thumbprint on as Bathory began to change and move away from just speed metal kind of stuff. But that's kind of besides the point. So in the 90s, Primordial was signing to Hammerheart Records from Holland. It must be like maybe 97, 98. Let me think about this. You have Journey's End is recorded in 97, released in 98. So 99, I think it was. We were doing the Burning Season EP and maybe working up to do Spirit the Earth the Flame. We were visiting the Hammerheart guys. And I met this very sad, depressed guy called Stan in a record shop. And his pidgin English and my bad German, he sort of intimated to me that he had some Manowar records for sale. Old Manowar records, signed Manowar records. I said, oh, well, let me collect every coin I have, every penny I have, which, let's be honest, wasn't much. Was probably barely €100 when I borrowed some money off Kieran. And we had to drive to meet at a truck stop somewhere, if I'm not wrong, between the Dutch and the German borders. This could be Enschede or something like this, or I can't remember the name of the town, but just on the border. And which is a bit weird place to meet to sell records. It's like we were meeting to buy, contraband of some description. Contraband, yes. But it wasn't. It was a bag full of Manowar records. And poor old Stan with his sad face. Sorry, Stan, if you're listening. Although something tells me you might not be. Poor old Stan arrived with his bags of Manowar records and he put them all out on the table. And we're talking all the first bootlegs from 84, signed by Manowar to Stan, which actually, if you look at it really quickly, looks like to Alan. Because the way Joey DeMaio scribbles Stan does quite look like Alan. So I'm sure I've passed that off as to me at 5 a.m. at some stage or other. It's obviously to me, back when I was 9. Bootlegs of all of those first records, Defender, picture discs, old bootleg 7 inches, first pressings of all the records signed by Manowar, all to him. I mean, 30 odd vinyls. And I was like, fucking hell. Right. Now, as it transpired, poor old Stan, he didn't want €100 for them all, as I thought he did in my misunderstanding of German. He wanted €100 each for each record. So, and then he looked at, I said, I've only got this, which was like €110, 110.15. It wouldn't have been euro, the equivalent of whatever it was at the most. And he just looked at me with his sad, doleful, baleful eyes. And he just said, well, pick two. I'll give you two. So I just picked out two and handed him back about 24 records. And then he just sat there. He took a very long, a big sigh, and he just went, just take them. Take them all. They have to be out of my life. And he just gave me all of these records and just took the money that I had and just got up, didn't say anything else, and just walked out. And I never saw him ever again. Headed off into the sunset after, gutting just literally a handful of dollars for stuff he'd been collecting since 1983-84. I did feel a bit bad, sort of, for about 10 seconds, and then I was like, whoa, the gods made heavy metal and they saw that it was good. And sure enough, every now and again, for the last 30 odd years or 28 years or whatever it is, the assigned Manowar collection comes out, although admittedly the people who are impressed by that are growing less and less, a bit like veterans of the Second World War. They sort of die off and move off the heavy metal diaspora, year by year. But still, sad stands, Manowar collection is still in my vinyl collection. Still amongst my ballast, weighing me down, which I can see over my shoulder. Right in the middle is a VHS video of Venom, the Seventh Date of Hell. No reason for it to be there. It's just there to remind me of the folly and impetuosity of youth, my friends, and that is intermingled with the obsession of vinyl collecting. Does it make any sense? I don't know, but it does feel great to have. It's your copy, your ownership of that piece of art that somebody else made. So I don't think we're wrong to want to or to collect records. It can get a bit obsessive, but it is your ballast and it will weigh you down when the opportunity comes to fly away and go and live on a Greek island and parade around these sun-kissed beaches dressed as Jesus or whatever it is. Well, my friends, that is the end of this random ramble just about record collecting. I promised I wouldn't mention politics or the French election or the Fourth or Fifth Republic or who knows, perhaps the Sixth Republic incoming. Let's do that another time. In the meantime, go and get yourself a six-pack. And my vote is start with Bonded by Blood by Exodus and off you go. My friends, Agitators Anonymous, episode 212 is just me bullshitting or waffling lyrical about collecting records. Until next time, Alan Averill over and out.